Thank you very much for that warm welcome. And I was talking to Tim Mahoney just day before yesterday, and he said the Patterns of Evidence is going to be a series of 3 films, and the second one is going to focus very heavily on the inscriptions at Sinai and what you're going to see in the next few minutes. And we're going to present today evidence that has just come to the surface that has never been presented before in any book or documentary. So you're going to get, like I said, your mind will be reeling before the next 2.5 hours are finished. So let's take a look. You know, I got so into the material last night that I forgot to tell you I've been working night and day for the last 4 months to re-edit and update my book, The Writing of God, that has all this information in it. It's now in publication, and you can pre-order it. You'll get the first one hot off the press in a couple of weeks, including we'll put in a DVD of the Writing of God presentation with that for pre-ordering it. But it is available now, and it's got all this documentation in it. So that you go to writingofgod.com, and you can also get there's a link to jonesesgeniuses.com, which has the information and materials that we used with the kids, and we'll talk about that at some length here. Jim and Penny were the ones who got this information out of Sinai, braved the frontier guards, braved going to prison, were arrested twice, and everyone else who has claimed to have discovered the real Mount Sinai has used their documentation to prove it, right? So I just wanted you to know that. Every single person since then who has claimed to have discovered the real Mount Sinai is basing it on their documentation. No one has ever provided any other documentation of it except for the Saudis themselves. And we're going to look at some of what they provided. They got in a tizzy and rushed in there to prove that this was not really Mount Sinai, and they ended up provenancing the evidence that is there. You know, provenance means evidence has to come with like a scientific credential, that it was discovered as part of a scientific endeavor, a real archaeological dig, for example, so that we can have a reasonable estimation that it's valid information. Good reason, right? Dr. Sung-Hak Kim is the other person who has gotten artifacts out of Saudi Arabia. He was physician to the royal family for 20 years, the governor of Mecca, who was a prince in the royal family, who loved him like a son and gave him artifacts and allowed him to take them out of the country. You can't take artifacts out of the country. You'll be jailed for many years, and it gets hot in the summer. I don't think they air condition in those prisons. So we'll be talking about him. This is the filming, part of the filming for the Patterns of Evidence series. So we will be, Tim said they're going to be focusing on the writing and the inscriptions and the petroglyphs at Sinai in the next film. I'm not sure when it's going to come out. I should have asked. The call from Sinai is a sacred covenant intended to make believers a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. So what does that mean, being a kingdom of priests? Well, obviously it does mean carrying the word, right? But a part of that is priests in ancient times were literate. They were the elite, the keepers of knowledge. And literacy was a monopoly that guarded their power. The ancient priests of Egypt, they didn't want universal education. It was at Sinai that Yahweh commanded that we educate everyone. Universal education comes from Mount Sinai. And the means for doing it was the word and the writing of God. Those were the tools for his transformation, for his nation building of the believers who followed him. And there was a blessing and a curse. There was a blessing for those who first of all, there's a blessing of the Exodus, there's a blessing of the covenant. A Sinai covenant is a teaching covenant. But the blessing of the Exodus was territory. If you get off the couch and get out of Egypt, then wherever the soles of your feet shall tread shall be your territory. And that was a command, by the way, that was given to Moses, to Joshua, and to Abraham. And we'll talk about that. And I suspect that will blow your mind too. This is the soles of their feet. And when I first came into contact with the Caldwells, they sent me, it was very interesting because I was basically given a divine revelation to find the evidence for the fact that this early writing at Sinai was the alphabet. The Ten Commandments were written in the first alphabetic writing. That was by divine revelation, and I hemmed and hawed and whined to God that, well, that's pretty big order. I don't think anything could have survived in 3,500 years, or how much money it would take, or how long it would take to try and find anything, or what incredible luck it might take. And so within a month, 2 months, I met someone who said, "Are you aware of the controversy that Mount Sinai is located in Arabia, like it says in Scripture?" I said, "No." So I found a book that had all this archaeological evidence in it, and I called the author, and he put me in touch with with Jim and Penny Caldwell. And they sent me the inscriptions in the mail. They said, we have inscriptions from the alphabetic inscriptions from the base of Mount Sinai. You think you could translate them? So 2 months after whining to God about not being able to how impossible this task was that he was giving me, I received the evidence in the mail. Didn't have to pay a penny for it. Now, I knew they had more that they probably didn't know how to interpret. So I drove to Mississippi where they live, and for a week we went over all the archives that we had collected. And then when this came up, I said that triple hash mark is an alphabetic inscription, and it means the soles of their feet. It comes from the Egyptian word for cup, kep, and it's used as a ligature against the instep of the foot. It means the cup, palm of the hand, or the cup, the instep of the foot. So it literally means the palm of the hand or the sole of the foot. I could have just looked in Strong's, right? Instead of researching it for 10 years. I could have just looked it up in Strong's, right? Yeah. I hate it when that happens. So it was required, obviously, because all the footprints there had this on there. So is there proof that these are alphabetic? All right, we're going to start with, we're going directly to the evidence that is at Sinai. Then we're going to kind of back up and talk about where, talk about when, put the historical data in there so you prove basically the when and the where of it, which is equally important. You can't just talk about what's at Sinai without dealing with the two big questions. When did it happen and where did it happen, right? And both of them have been skewed, if you will, or tortured, or denied by modern historical science. So is there proof that these three hash marks are alphabetic? Here they are in an inscription that says Died Kaliya. You can see the third one down is a triple hash mark. This is clear proof that is used as an alphabetic letter. The two ox heads are from the old pictographic alphabet. This alphabet of letters came from a pictograph, and it was derived from the Egyptian glyphs. And they took some of those glyphs and they simplified them. They were still pictographic, but they simplified them and they made a pictographic alphabet like you have in your child's alphabet book. A is for apple, B is for ball, C is for cat, D is for dog, right? So in this case, those alephs are from the old pictographic alphabet. So this inscription was done really at the same time, obviously at the point where they are changing over from this pictographic alphabet to one purely of letter symbols. Second commandment says, you shall not make any graven images. Graven images are hieroglyphs. Those are the graven images that they knew. Because what would happen? You don't have to guess, by the way. It happened. While Moses was up on the mountain, they made a standing idol of the golden calf, which is a different thing from a graven image, but it's an abomination of the same sort. And then they put graven images all over the rocks of the altar, and they bowed down and worshiped them, right? And that's exactly why God said you cannot make graven images, because you'll bow down to them and worship them. Is that clear enough? And they did that, exactly that. So, because that's where they came from, that's what they knew. It's much easier to worship something you can see than to worship an unknown God of absolute truth and absolute love. That takes some stretching of the mind to grasp the reality of the nature of God. Worshipping a stone statue is much easier, right? So this is the classic marker of the Proto-Sinaitic alphabet, the old pictographic one. And it's where our modern A came from, actually. So at that point, it was no longer a picture, it's now a symbol. There are 155 inscriptions, and they're in a writing called the Mudak Script, which is widely accepted now. It was the oldest alphabet of letters known to historical science. There's 155 of them on the mountain. I have like 5 of them. Love to read the others, wouldn't you? Well, maybe I can get them. One of them says, then came Amalek and fought with Israel in Rephidim. Okay, and this was found in the periphery of the camp at the base of Mount Sinai, and it says, died Amalek. Oldest impulse in the book is to record where you conquered an enemy. Straight out of the pages of Exodus, right? Well, it gets better. These 3 were found in a grouping. This one says, died Hagar. Now, there's more there. The last line on the bottom says, died Hagar, reading from left to right. And there were no standards at the time. They might have written left to right or right to left. And actually, you can reverse it. Just flip it horizontally on the picture, and you'll have it written right to left. So this one says, died Hagar, a name directly associated with the mountain of God in Scripture. Right? Hagar is Mount Sinai in Arabia, right? That's pretty clear, pretty direct association. This is not to say that this was that Hagar, but it's a name that would have been very prominent in the region, right? Because of Midian was directly a descendant of Hagar, right? So they were in Midian. This one says, died Amaya Bat Hagar, which is a very significant inscription because Bat is Hebrew. Names can be from anywhere, right? I mean, it may be an Egyptian name or a Hebrew name, but when you put Bat in it, it means the inscription is written in Hebrew because it's a different word in the other languages of the region. So Amaya, daughter of Hagar. So these 3 were found, and it tells a story. It tells a story that is straight from the pages of Exodus. The rescuers apparently got there in time to kill one of the Amalekite, because God hated the Amalekites. They would prey on the members of the Israelites that had dropped behind. They were tired. They were weary. They were at the extremity of the camp. They were without protection. And they would prey on these people on the fringes of the camp. So they got there in time to kill the Amalekite, but not to save the lives of Hagar and her daughter, Amaya. So that is a story that comes straight out of the Exodus.